The sky above Prime burned orange and red, stood at her office window and watched the capital city fall apart. Explosions lit up the horizon every few seconds. Ships fell from the sky like dying birds, leaving trails of black smoke behind them. She had worked in this building for 12 years. She had watched the sun rise over the silver towers of the government quarter 1,000 times. Now those towers were breaking apart. Glass and metal rained down on the streets below. They had come, and they had come with more ships than anyone had expected. Her communication device buzzed. It was Commander. "Get to the emergency bunker, now." "How bad is it?" she asked, even though she could see the answer outside her window. "We've lost 70% of the orbital defense stations. The fleet is pulling back to protect what's left. We have maybe 6 hours before they control the skis completely." Closed her eyes. 6 hours. That was all that remained of their freedom. The Confederation had stood for 800 years. It would fall in less than a day. She grabbed her bag and ran. The streets were chaos. People ran in every direction, carrying children and bags of belongings. Hover vehicles crashed into each other as everyone tried to escape at once. Soldiers in gray armor moved against the flow, heading toward the fighting. Most of them looked young, too young. Reached the bunker entrance just as another wave of explosions shook the ground. The heavy doors closed behind her, cutting off the sounds of destruction. Inside, the air was cool and quiet. Emergency lights cast everything in pale blue. The council chamber was full when she arrived. Ambassador sat at the head of the table, his old face lined with worry. Commander stood beside a holographic display that showed their planet surrounded by red dots. Each dot was a warship. There were so many that parts of the display looked solid red. "We need to discuss our option," said. His voice was calm but could see his hands shaking. "What options?" replied. "We fight until we can't fight anymore. That's our only option." "And then what?" "Everyone dies." Another council member spoke up. Her name was, and she represented the civilian population. "There are 40 million people in this city alone. We have a duty to protect them." "You want to surrender," said. It wasn't a question. "I want to explore every possibility before we sacrifice millions of lives for pride." The room erupted in argument. Some wanted to fight to the end. Others wanted to negotiate. A few wanted to evacuate as many people as possible and abandon the planet. Listened to all of it, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about a story her grandmother had told her. It was about a time, 30 years ago, when their people had faced a different kind of trouble. Pirates had been raiding their outer colonies, and their military had been stretched too thin to respond. Someone had suggested hearing outside help. They had contacted a species that most people had never heard of. Humans. A single human had come. His name was. He had trained their security forces, helped them set up better defense systems, and personally led the mission that destroyed the pirate base. His grandmother had met him once. She said he was strange. He laughed too loud, ate foods that would poison her, and seemed to enjoy danger in a way that made no sense. But he had helped them. When no one else would, he had helped them. "What about the humans?" said. The room went quiet. Everyone looked at her. "The humans," repeated. "The primitive species that can barely travel between stars. They helped us before, 30 years ago. A human consultant helped us deal with the Outer Rim pirates." Leaned forward. "I remember that. He was effective." "One human helped with pirates," said. "This is a full invasion by the Empire. What could humans possibly do?" "I don't know," admitted. "But we have no other options. Our allies have abandoned us. The Galactic Council refused to intervene. They have more ships than we could ever hope to fight. What do we have to lose by asking?" No one answered. The silence stretched on. Finally nodded slowly. "She's right, we have nothing to lose. Do you think you can contact them?" "I can try. We still have the old communication records in the archives." Then try, the rest of us will continue planning our defense. He looked around the table. We will fight as long as we can, but perhaps if the universe is kind, help will come. Didn't believe the universe was kind. She had seen too much evidence to the contrary, but she left the council chamber and headed for the communications center anyway. The archives were dusty and old. Most of the files hadn't been accessed in decades. It took her 3 hours to find the right records, the communication frequency for human space, the contact code for organization. A note in the file said he had told them to call if they ever needed help again. She wondered if he had meant it. Humans said many things, all species did. Words were easy, action was hard. She entered the frequency and sent the message. It was simple and direct. This is of the Confederation. Our world is under attack by the Empire. We are losing. We need help. Please respond. Then she waited. Above her, through hundreds of meters of rock and metal, the commander was broadcasting his victory speech to the galaxy. He spoke of the fall of Prime as if it had already happened. He spoke of weakness and superiority. He spoke of a new order rising from the ashes of the old. Didn't hear any of it. She sat alone in the dim communication room, watching the screen, hopping for a response that might never come. Hours passed. The fighting continued. Reports came in of districts falling one by one. The civilian shelters were filling up. Food and water supplies were already running low. Just before dawn, when it had almost given up hope, the screen lit up. A face appeared, human, male, older than she expected, with gray in his hair and scars on his face, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "This is," he said. "I got your message, tell me everything." Felt something she hadn't felt in hours. It was small and fragile, but it was there. Hope. Stared at the face on the screen. Looked different from the pictures in the old files. 30 years had changed him. His hair had gone gray at the edges. Deep lines marked his face. But there was something in his eyes that hadn't changed. A sharpness. A focus. "Start from the beginning," he said. "How many ships do they have?" Pulled up the tactical data and sent it through the connection. Over 300 warships. They arrived 2 days ago without warning. We had no time to prepare. Studied the information. His expression didn't change. "I've heard of them. Aggressive, territorial. They don't take prisoners." "No, they don't." "How's your defense holding?" "It's not. We've lost most of our orbital stations. Our fleet is down to 40 ships. Commander is trying to protect the evacuation routes, but," she paused, "we can't win this fight." "How many civilians on the planet?" "Prime has a population of 2 billion. The capital city alone has 40 million people." Went quiet, watched his face on the screen. She couldn't read human expressions very well, but something seemed to change in him. His jaw tightened. His eyes grew harder. 2 billion people, he repeated softly. "Yes, they have already started ground operations. They're moving toward the population centers." "What do they want? Territory, resources?" "They want to make an example. We refused to join their empire 10 years ago. They said they would make us regret that decision. I suppose this is what they meant." Nodded slowly. "An example. So they're going to slaughter civilians to send a message to the rest of the galaxy." "That seems to be their plan." For a long moment said nothing. Felt her hope beginning to fade. What could one human do? What could any number of humans do? They were one of the most powerful military forces in the known galaxy. Humans were scattered across a handful of colony worlds, barely organized, still new to interstellar travel. Then spoke, "Hold for 72 hours." "What?" "72 hours. 3 days, can you do that?" I don't know, maybe, but why?" "Because I'm going to make some calls." He leaned forward. "I can't promise anything. Humans don't have a unified military. We don't have a central government that can order people into battle. But I know people. Good people. People who served with me. People who have ships and weapons and the skills to use them. You think they will come for us? I think when they hear that 2 billion civilians are about to be murdered, a lot of them will have something to say about it. Felt tears forming in her eyes, she blinked them away. We can't pay you, our treasury is gone, our government is barely functioning. Smiled, it was a strange expression, warm but sad at the same time. We don't want your money, just hold on, I'll be in touch. The screen went dark. Sat alone in the communication room for a long time. She didn't know if she should believe him. Humans were unpredictable. Everyone said so. They made promises they couldn't keep. They acted on emotion instead of logic. They were chaotic and disorganized. But 30 years ago, when no one else had helped, a human had come. She stood up and went to find Commander. The command center was buried even deeper in the bunker. Stood in front of a massive holographic display, watching the battle unfold in real time. His face was grim. More red dots appeared every hour as reinforcements arrived. Commander said, I made contact. Looked at her, the humans. Yes, a man named, the same one who helped us before. And is he sending help? He said to hold for 72 hours. He's gathering people. Laughed, it was a bitter sound. 72 hours. Does he understand what we're facing? Does he understand that we might not survive 72 minutes? He understands. And what kind of help is he bringing? A dozen ships, 100. We need thousands to have any chance against the. I don't know what he's bringing, but he's the only one who answered our call. Turned back to the display. For a moment thought he would dismiss her, but then his shoulders dropped slightly. 3 days, he said. We hold for 3 days. Can we do it? We can try. Pull back our remaining ships to a defensive position around the evacuation corridors. Focus all ground forces on protecting the civilian shelters. If we can keep them bottled up at the landing zones, we might slow them down. He started giving orders. Officers rushed to carry them out. The bunker became a hurricane of activity. Returned to the communications center. Was there now, a young communications specialist with quick fingers and bright eyes. She had been monitoring all frequencies, trying to gather intelligence on movements. Did it work? Asked. Did you reach someone? I did, a human. He's trying to gather help. Humans? Looked doubtful. My professor always said humans were too primitive to be useful in a real war. They don't even have proper shield technology. Maybe, but they have something else. What? Thought about's face when she told him about the civilians. The way his expression had changed. The cold determination that had entered his voice. I don't know how to describe it, she said, but I think we're about to find out. Above ground, they continued their advance. They burned buildings and destroyed vehicles. They broadcast messages demanding surrender. Their commander, a tall figure named, appeared on every screen, promising mercy to those who submitted and death to those who resisted. But in the bunkers beneath the city, they kept fighting. They sabotaged supply lines. They rescued civilians from destroyed buildings. They held their ground even when everything seemed lost. And across the vast distance of space, in dozens of different systems, humans were receiving messages. Old soldiers were dusting off their weapons. Retired pilots were warming up their ships. People who had thought their fighting days were over were looking at the images of burning cities and scared civilians. They were making decisions. Some of them said no. They had families now, responsibilities. They weren't their people and this wasn't their war. But others said yes. They said yes because they remembered what it felt like to be helpless. They said yes because they couldn't watch 2 billion people die and do nothing. They said yes because somewhere deep inside them, something refused to accept the idea of standing by while innocents suffered. One by one, ships began to move. They headed for a meeting point in deep space, a place where was waiting. The 72 hours had begun. Myra was drinking coffee on the bridge of her freighter when the message came. She almost deleted it without reading. She got dozens of messages every day, mostly junk. Shipping contracts, cargo manifests, the usual business of running a freight company. But the subject line caught her eye. It said, "For anyone who still remembers how to fight." She opened it. The message was from. She hadn't heard that name in 15 years. They had served together during the colony wars. She remembered him as a tough, stubborn man who never knew when to quit. The message was short. It contained coordinates, a time, and a few sentences of explanation. They were being invaded. 2 billion civilians were about to die. Anyone who could fight should come. Myra closed the message. She stared at the stars through her viewport. She had retired from military service 8 years ago. She had bought this freighter and started a new life. A peaceful life. No more killing. No more watching friends die. No more nightmares. She opened the message again. There was a video attached, footage from Prime, cities burning, people running, bodies in the streets. She watched a mother carrying 2 children through smoke and flames. The woman fell. She got up. She kept running. Myra closed the video. Her hands were shaking. "Computer," she said, "set course for the following coordinates." On another world, sat in his small apartment and stared at the same message. He was young, only 23. He had never been in a real war. He had trained as a combat pilot, but he had never fired his weapons at anything except practice targets. His grandmother sat across from him. She was old and small, her skin wrinkled with age, but her eyes were still sharp. "You're going to go," she said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know, it's dangerous. I never told you this story," she interrupted. "When I was young, our colony was attacked by raiders. Everyone said we were finished. No one was coming to help. We were too far from Earth, too unimportant." Had heard pieces of this story before, but never the whole thing. "A ship appeared," his grandmother continued. "An alien ship, species called they were passing through our system on a trade mission. They saw what was happening and they stopped to help. They lost 12 of their crew saving our colony. They didn't know us. We weren't their people, but they helped anyway." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I am alive because of them. You are alive because of them. Do you understand?" Understood. The rendezvous point was a dark region of space, far from any star. Ships began arriving one by one. Old warships, modified freighters, personal fighters. Some were battered and worn, others gleamed with fresh repairs. They came from every corner of human space. Watched them gather from the bridge of his own ship. It was a converted patrol vessel, 30 years old but still reliable. Around him, his crew worked silently, tracking the arrivals. "How many?" asked his second-in-command, a tall woman named. 87 ships so far. More are still coming." "Is it enough?" Didn't answer. He didn't know if it was enough. They had over 300 warships. The human fleet was smaller, older, and completely unorganized. These weren't soldiers following orders. These were volunteers who had chosen to fight for strangers. But that was what made them dangerous. "Open a channel to all ships," said. He stood before the communication screen and looked at the faces appearing before him. Myra, dozens of others, old soldiers and young pilots, engineers and medics, people who had every reason to stay home and no reason to risk their lives. "You all know why you're here," began. "They are dying. 2 billion people are about to be erased by an enemy that wants to make an example of them. The galaxy has decided to look away. The Galactic Council called it an internal matter. Their allies said it was too risky to intervene." He paused. "We're not the galaxy. We're not some council that votes on whether people deserve to live. We're humans, and humans don't watch innocents die when we can do something about it." A murmur went through the fleet. Agreement, determination. "I won't lie to you. They outnumber us 3 to 1. Their ships are bigger and more advanced. Some of us won't come back from this. If anyone wants to leave, now is the time. No one will think less of you." No one moved, no one left. Felt something warm in his chest, pride maybe, or love. Then let's go save some people. Far away on a command ship orbiting Prime, Commander was enjoying his victory. He stood in his war room, surrounded by officers and servants. The holographic display showed his forces controlling 80% of the planet. They were broken. It was only a matter of time. An officer approached him. "Commander, our long-range sensors have detected a fleet approaching." Smiled, "Reinforcements. Excellent. The Emperor is pleased with our progress." "Sir, they're not ships. The signatures are unfamiliar. We believe they may be human." Human laughed. "The primitives, how many ships?" "Over 100, Commander, and more arriving every few minutes." 100 primitive ships against our 300 warships. Let them come. We'll add their wreckage to our victory. But his intelligence officer looked concerned. "Commander, I have read reports about humans. They have a reputation." "A reputation for what?" "Losing. For not knowing when to stop fighting. For continuing even when victory is impossible. For doing things that seem insane by any rational measure." Waved his hand dismissively. "Superstition and propaganda. They're primitives who can barely maintain their own ships. They pose no threat." The intelligence officer said nothing, but he quietly began pulling up everything he could find about human warfare. What he found made his blood run cold. Back on Prime, received a short message on her personal device. It was from, "We're coming. Tell your people to hold on." She ran to find Commander. When she told him the news, he looked at her with tired eyes. "How many ships?" He didn't say exactly, but it sounds like more than we expected. "It doesn't matter how many," said. "Any help is more than we had yesterday." He turned to his officers. "Spread the word to all units. Help is coming. We just have to survive a little longer." The word spread through the bunkers and shelters like fire. Help was coming. Someone had answered their call. They were not alone. In the darkness of space, the human fleet jumped to hyperspace. 147 ships, carrying thousands of volunteers. They were going to war against impossible odds. And they were smiling. Commander was eating his evening meal when the alarm started. He dropped his food and rushed to the war room. Officers were scrambling everywhere. The holographic display showed dozens of new contacts appearing at the edge of the system. Reports demanded. "Human fleet just exited hyperspace, Commander. 147 ships. They're heading directly for us." Studied the display. The human ships were small compared to his warships. Many looked old and poorly maintained. Some appeared to be civilian vessels modified for combat. Against his fleet of 300 advanced warships, they looked like insects approaching a giant. "This is their rescue force," laughed. "This is what they have been waiting for. Destroy them." He settled into his command chair and watched the battle unfold. It would be quick. It would be easy. He would add human ships to his collection of victories. The first wave of fighters launched toward the human fleet. 200 small attack craft, fast and deadly. They had destroyed entire squadrons in minutes. The humans would be no different. The humans didn't run. They didn't spread out. They flew straight at the fighters. The two forces met in a flash of weapons fire. Pilots expected the humans to die quickly. Their ships were inferior. Their weapons were weaker. There was no logical way they could win. But something strange happened. Human ships took damage that should have destroyed them. One fighter lost half its wing and kept flying. Another was hit directly in the engine and somehow stayed in the fight. A third ship, burning and falling apart, rammed itself into an attack craft, destroying both. "Commander," an officer said, his voice uncertain. "Human casualties are lower than expected." "What do you mean?" "They're not dying, sir. We're hitting them, we're damaging them, but they keep fighting. Leaned forward. On the display, he watched a human pilot perform a maneuver that should have killed him. The forces would have crushed any pilot, but the human survived and shot down 2 enemies in the process. Their bodies, the intelligence officer said quietly. Human bodies are different from ours. They can survive damage that would kill most species. They heal faster. They endure more pain. Impossible. There are records, Commander. In ground combat, humans have been shot multiple times and continued fighting. They have lost limbs and refused to fall. Their planet is considered a death world. Everything there evolved to survive extreme conditions. Watched his fighters begin to fall back. They had lost 30 craft. The humans had lost only 8. Send the cruisers, ordered. Destroy them with heavy weapons. 20 cruisers advanced on the human fleet. These were real warships, armed with weapons that could crack planets. The human ships were nothing compared to them. Myra saw the cruisers coming. She was on the bridge of her freighter, which had been fitted with extra weapons and armor. Around her, her crew worked with calm efficiency. "They're trying to overwhelm us with firepower," she said. "Standard tactic. They expect us to break formation and run." Her pilot looked at her. "What do we do?" Myra smiled. It was not a kind smile. "We don't run, signal the fleet, pattern 7. The human ships didn't retreat. Instead, they accelerated. They flew directly at the cruisers, splitting into small groups, weaving between enemy fire. They were too small and too fast for the heavy weapons to track. They got close, very close. Human ships began landing on the hulls of cruisers. Airlocks blew open. Boarding parties poured out. Led one of them. He wore combat armor and carried weapons in both hands. Behind him came 20 volunteers. They had trained for this. They had prepared for close combat. The inside of the ship was chaos. Alarms screamed. Soldiers rushed to stop them. Weapons fire filled the corridors. Took a hit to his shoulder. The impact spun him around. Blood ran down his arm. He ignored it and kept shooting. A soldier charged him, dropped his weapon and met the charge with his bare hands. Were strong, but humans were stronger than they looked. Broke the soldier's arm and threw him into a wall. "Keep moving," shouted. "Engine room is this way." They fought through corridor after corridor. More humans fell, but more fell with them. The boarding parties moved like viruses through the enemy ships, destroying everything they could reach. On the surface of Prime, watched the battle through a damaged telescope. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. "They're insane," he whispered. "They're completely insane." Beside him watched two. "They're winning." She was right. The formation was breaking apart. 3 cruisers were already drifting, their engines destroyed by boarding parties. Others were pulling back, trying to deal with the humans inside them. Fighter squadron broke through the chaos and headed for the planet. They had one mission: support the ground forces and protect civilian evacuation. He flew low over the capital city. Below him, he could see troops advancing on a civilian shelter. Thousands of were trapped inside. Tanks moved toward the entrance. Dove, his weapons locked onto the first tank, he fired. The tank exploded. Then the second, then the third, pulled up just before hitting the ground, his engines screaming. "All pilots focus on ground targets," he ordered. "Protect the civilians." Human fighters swept over the battlefield like angry birds. They destroyed tanks and troop carriers. They scattered infantry. They gave the time to escape. In the shelter, a young child looked up through a crack in the ceiling. She saw a human fighter fly past, so close she could almost touch it. The pilot waved at her. She waved back. On his command ship, watched his victory crumble. Half his cruisers were damaged or destroyed. His fighter squadrons were in chaos. Human ground support was tearing apart his invasion force. "This is impossible," he said. "They're primitives. They should have died hours ago." "Commander," an officer said, Our outer ships are retreating. They're refusing orders to advance. Cowards, all of them. Sir, perhaps we should consider withdrawal. We can return with reinforcements. Slammed his fist on his chair. I do not retreat, not from primitives, not from anyone. But as he watched the display, he saw the truth. He was losing. Against a smaller, weaker, more primitive enemy, he was losing. On the surface, Myra's freighter had landed near a destroyed hospital. Her crew was helping evacuate the wounded. She carried a child in her arms, running through smoke and fire toward a transport ship. The child was crying. Myra held her close and spoke softly. "It's okay. You're safe now. I've got you." She didn't speak. The child didn't understand her words, but something in her voice communicated safety. The child stopped crying. A soldier appeared from the smoke. He raised his weapon. Myra turned, shielding the child with her body. She couldn't reach her own weapon. She waited for the shot. It never came. Fighter screamed overhead, and the soldier disappeared in a flash of fire. Myra looked up. She couldn't see the pilot, but she nodded anyway. The battle wasn't over yet, but something had changed. They were no longer advancing. They were running. The fleet retreated at dawn. They left behind burning ships and abandoned soldiers. Commander's flagship was the last to go, jumping to hyperspace with half its weapons destroyed and fires burning on 3 decks. Stood on the surface and watched the enemy ships disappear. Around her, soldiers and civilians were emerging from shelters and bunkers. They looked at the sky with disbelief. They had expected to die. Instead, they were alive. The human ships remained in orbit. Small transport craft began landing, bringing medical supplies and food. Human volunteers worked alongside doctors, treating the wounded. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't ask for recognition. They just worked. Found in a field hospital near the ruined government quarter. He was sitting on a medical bed while a doctor wrapped bandages around his shoulder. His face was pale from blood loss, but he was smiling at something a young nurse had said. "You came," said. Looked up, I said I would. You lost ships, you lost people. 31 ships, 84 people. His smile faded. Good people, people with families waiting for them back home. Sat down beside him. Why, you didn't know us, we're not your people, we had nothing to offer you. Was quiet for a long moment. The sounds of the hospital filled the silence, patients groaning, doctors shouting orders, machines beeping. When I was young, he said finally, my home colony was destroyed. Raiders came and burned everything. I was 7 years old. I hid in a basement for 3 days while they killed everyone I knew. I'm sorry. No one came to help us. We sent distress signals. We begged for rescue, but no one came. The colony was too small, too unimportant. It wasn't worth the risk. He looked at her. His eyes were old and tired, but there was something burning deep inside them. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would be the one who comes. When people are dying and no one else will help, humans will help, because we know what it feels like to be alone. Felt tears running down her face. She didn't try to stop them. Thank you, she said. Thank you for coming. Shrugged with his good shoulder. It's what we do. Outside the hospital, Myra was organizing supply distribution. Her freighter had become a temporary warehouse, filled with food and medicine donated by human colonies. Volunteers formed lines to carry supplies to shelters across the city. An official approached her. We don't know how to repay you. Our treasury is empty. Our economy is destroyed. Myra laughed. We don't want payment, just take care of your people, that's enough. But why? I don't understand. What do humans gain from this? Myra stopped and looked at him. She was covered in dirt and blood. She had been working without sleep for 2 days, but her eyes were clear. We gained the knowledge that we did the right thing, that when people needed help, we helped. That's worth more than money. The official looked confused. Myra didn't expect him to understand. Some things couldn't be explained. They had to be felt. In the ruins of the city center, found the shelter where he had provided air support. The building was damaged but still standing. Thousands of had survived inside. A crowd gathered around him when he landed. They touched his ship. They touched his armor. Children stared at him with wide eyes. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd. She walked with difficulty, supported by a younger man. When she reached, she took his hands. "You saved us," she said. Her voice was weak but clear. "You came from the stars and saved us." Didn't know what to say. He thought about his grandmother, about the story she had told him, about the who had saved her colony 60 years ago. "Someone saved my grandmother once," he said. "Your people. Now we saved you. That's how it works. We help each other." The old woman smiled. "Then perhaps the galaxy is not as dark as I thought." The memorial ceremony was held 3 days later. They gathered in a field outside the city, humans and together. Simple markers had been placed for each person who died in the battle. Human names and names, side by side. Ambassador spoke first. His voice was strong despite his age. "We called for help and help came. Not from our allies, not from the Galactic Council, from humans. People we barely knew. People who had nothing to gain and everything to lose." He paused, looking at the human volunteers in the crowd. "We will never forget this. For as long as the Confederation exists, we will remember that humans answered our call. We will remember the 84 humans who gave their lives for strangers." Spoke next, he kept his words short. "We came because it was the right thing to do. Because when someone asks for help, you help them. Because that's what humans believe." He looked at the sky. "To those we lost, we honor you. Your names will be spoken. Your sacrifice will be remembered. And the next time someone calls for help, we will answer again." After the ceremony, walked through the rows of markers. They stopped at each human name, learned their stories. A pilot who had 2 daughters waiting at home. A medic who had volunteered despite having no combat training. A captain who had rammed her ship into a cruiser to save a transport full of civilians. "They were brave," said. "They were human," replied. "Bravery isn't special for us, it's normal. We grew up on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We learned to fight, to endure, to never give up. That's just who we are." Word of the Battle of Prime spread across the galaxy. Other species heard the story. Some were impressed. Some were scared. Some began to wonder if they had underestimated the primitive humans. The Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. They discussed the human intervention. Some called it reckless. Others called it inspiring. A few quietly began reaching out to human colonies, asking about mutual defense agreements. The Empire issued threats. They promised revenge against the humans who had interfered in their conquest. But privately, their military leaders were studying the battle footage. They were learning a lesson they would never forget. Humans were dangerous, not because of their technology, not because of their numbers, but because they refused to accept defeat. They fought for strangers. They died for principles. They were unpredictable in the most terrifying way possible. On the last day before the human fleet departed, met at the spaceport. His shoulder was healing. He looked better than he had in days. "What happens now?" she asked. "We go home, rest, repair our ships, wait for the next call." "And there will be a next call." Smiled. "There always is. The galaxy is full of bullies and victims. We can't save everyone, but we can try." Handed him a small device. "This is a direct communication link to me. If you ever need help, call, the will answer." Took the device and looked at it for a long moment. Then he laughed. "Now we're building something. A network of people who help each other. That's how things change. Not through conquest or politics. Through people choosing to do the right thing." He shook her hand. A strange human gesture, but had learned to appreciate it. "Until next time," he said. "Until next time," she replied. She watched his ship rise into the sky and disappear among the stars. Around her, the city was beginning to rebuild. The fires were out. The dead were buried. Life was continuing. She looked up at the endless darkness of space. Somewhere out there, humans were flying home. Ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. People who had answered a call for help from strangers and asked for nothing in return. The galaxy would never see them the same way again. Neither would she.